The moment I saw emergency family meeting in Chloe's text, I didn't feel alarmed, I felt confirmed. I had known something was coming. You can sense a storm long before the lightning strikes, especially when you've lived your entire life under the thunderclouds of the Bennett family. As I turned off the main road and onto the long gravel driveway, rain smeared the windshield in thick streaks. My old Honda coughed in protest, its wipers squealing with a kind of indignation that matched my mood. The estate loomed ahead, symmetrical, cold, and smug. Weston's finest brick and bone. We handle problems in-house, my father once told me. That meant the family handled problems their way. Quietly. Bloodlessly. No screaming, just strategic strangulation, usually delivered with a smile and a scotch in hand. I parked beside a row of glossy black cars and stepped out my sneakers, hitting the wet pavement with a satisfying splash. No umbrella, no effort to match their polished image. My jeans were faded, my sweater stretched my hair, pulled back in a braid I hadn't checked twice. Let them see what they'd tried to prune from the family tree. Chloe opened the front door before I reached it. Her eyes flitted across my outfit like a scanner looking for threats. She smiled, a soft, brittle thing, and leaned in for a hug I barely returned. "You made it," she said. Her voice was laced with forced warmth, like someone trying to straddle two sides of a crumbling bridge. Dad wanted to keep this intimate. Of course he did. The dining room was curated to perfection, just like every other corner of this museum they called home. Polished silver, crystal glasses, a long mahogany table that stretched like a battlefield. I was ushered to the far end opposite Gregory, who already sat at the head like a judge awaiting trial. Chloe slid into her usual position beside him. Susan was all pearls and pursed lips, her concern as performative as ever. Uncle Charles gave me a nod, half courtesy, half calculation. No one made small talk. No one asked about the drive. Gregory folded his hands and looked at me with the stern patience of a man about to deliver a business report. "Lauren," he began, "we've been talking. There's concern. The business you've started, it's unfortunate." I tilted my head. Unfortunate. There's no shame in admitting something isn't working. Susan offered, her voice sweetened with pity. Sometimes people need to be guided back to what's stable. "We're stepping in," Gregory said plainly, "for your own sake." I didn't flinch. I had practiced this in my head so many times that by now it felt like reading lines from a play I no longer respected. Charles cleared his throat and opened a folder. "As trustee, I've temporarily frozen the remainder of your trust fund. Legally, we're entitled to do so under the protective clause until you demonstrate fiscal responsibility." Fiscal responsibility. That was rich coming from a man who profited off penny stocks and panic. Still, I didn't protest. I picked up my wine glass, the stem cold in my fingers. The Pinot Noir clung to the sides like it didn't want to be swallowed either. I took a sip and smiled. "Interesting timing," I said lightly. No one moved. Outwardly, I appeared serene, but inside the wheels had already turned. I had known this day would come, that they would attempt one final grasp for the reins disguised as concern cloaked in tradition. But I wasn't the girl who used to ask for their approval anymore. I was something they hadn't accounted for, a patient. My phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced down without lifting it from beneath the tablecloth. 6:58 p.m. Right on schedule. 2 more minutes. I whispered it to myself, barely audible. 2 minutes. They claimed concern, but every word was a knife disguised as a napkin. The wine had mellowed. The lights had dimmed. And yet, the temperature in the room hadn't changed. Still cool, still deliberate, still sharpened around the edges. The first course of the ambush had passed the freezing of my trust fund, the declaration of my business as a misguided detour. But now came the second wave, the one dressed in civility. This is where the Bennetts thrived. Not in confrontation, but in the art of slowly unraveling you while smiling into their brandy glasses. Gregory leaned back, his drink in hand. Failure, he had once said, is contagious. We won't let it spread. Tonight, I could hear the echo of that warning in every glance cast down the table. Chloe turned toward me, ever the polished diplomat. You know, she said gently, there's an open position at my firm. Paralegal track. It's not glamorous, but it's something solid to hold on to while you regain your footing. Regain. As if I had tripped over my own feet instead of being pushed. I didn't respond. Just watched the way her hands folded neatly in her lap, the way her words tried to sound like a bridge and not a leash. Susan chimed in, her voice full of nostalgic venom. You remember Ellie, your roommate from Columbia? She just made them 30 under 30 for her work with the Urban Shelter Initiative. Helping people, it always brought out the better side of you, Lauren. The better side. The tame side. The side that knew how to be small enough to fit in their box. Gregory placed his glass down with a soft click. You should have come to us earlier, he said. There's no shame in asking for help, but instead you pursued a vapor dream. Vaporware. Uncle Charles muttered, not even bothering to meet my eye. That's what the industry calls it, doesn't it? A product that never materializes. Just smoke and PowerPoints. My company was real. Our prototype had finished development 2 weeks ago. We'd been under embargo pending press release. But none of them knew that. They didn't ask. They'd made their decision months ago. Chloe tilted her head, her voice now dipped in mock empathy. I told them about last Christmas. You remember? When the funding round collapsed and you didn't show up for dinner? I thought they had a right to know what was going on. I stared at her. My own sister. Her voice hadn't trembled. Her eyes didn't waver. She believed what she did was justified. Necessary, even. For the family. It was just so hard. She continued, watching you spiral. I mean, we were worried. This was always the patterned suffocation disguised as rescue. I inhaled slowly. The oak-paneled walls seemed to inch closer with every word. And then I spoke. Is this an ambush? I asked softly. Or a eulogy? No one moved. The silence was exquisite. A slight tension bristled through the air like a dropped string in a symphony hall. For once, even Gregory didn't jump to answer. Then came the sound. Susan's phone buzzed. She glanced down. Her fingers froze above the screen. A beat passed. Her brow furrowed and something shifted behind her eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because I already knew. The embargo had lifted, and the article had just dropped. My smile deepened slowly, precisely as I reached for my glass again. While they prepared speeches, I prepared code, and infrastructure, and revenge. There was a time they thought my startup lived in a coffee shop and a Wi-Fi password. That I was just a woman with a dream clinging to pitch decks and borrowed time. Let them believe that. I fed the image. Let them picture me crouched in a studio apartment, scrambling for seed money, drowning in ambition. All while I built something far beyond their comprehension. Are you really going to let them find out in print? Emily had asked just 2 days ago, fingers poised above the keyboard. They wouldn't believe me if I told them I'd answered. So let them read it. The real story unfolded in a 3-story converted warehouse in Cambridge. Glass walls, modular desks, the hum of power from servers no one ever saw. This wasn't a pipe dream. It was a company, a real one, my company. The kind they said I wasn't capable of leading. Full stack development on the bottom floor. Quantum engineers on the second. Legal and strategic ops on the mezzanine. Every floor humming with silent revolution. Emily hovered beside my desk, now tablet in hand. Everything's in place. The WSJ piece goes live at 7:10 p.m. Eastern. You want to read it one more time? I shook my head. I wrote it. They edited it. I trust them. The piece wasn't just a profile. It was an expose, a revelation. The story of a woman they'd dismissed, belittled, underestimated, and who was now moments away from closing a multi-million-dollar acquisition with a Fortune 50 company. My inbox pinged. Derek. Always precise, always 5 minutes early. Subject, final M&A status. Quantum Bridge acquisition closing window. Confirmed, he said as he walked into the glass-walled conference room, laptop under one arm. Documents fully signed. Wire transfer holds until Tuesday. That gives us 3 days. I nodded. Plenty. Chloe's name came up again. Emily added, pulling up a screen. Her credentials pinged the Quantum Bridge legal server last night. I arched an eyebrow. She doesn't work there. She has no clearance, Emily continued. But someone gave her temporary portal access. We flagged it, but didn't block. My jaw tightened slightly. Of course she'd try something. Chloe had always played the long game, cozying up to contacts, collecting favors, acting like she was simply doing her legal due diligence. But she wasn't clever, just persistent. Don't interfere, I said calmly. Let her walk into the wall. Derek exchanged a glance with Emily, but said nothing. They understood the rules of this particular game. Patience wins. Exposure lands better when it's self-inflicted. A soft chime echoed from my phone. The WSJ editor's final confirmation. Emily leaned over. It's up next. I didn't need to check. I knew the timing. I'd chosen it carefully, 20 minutes into a family ambush when tension ran high and defenses ran low. It was surgical. I turned slightly in my chair, watching my own reflection in the glass. The woman in the mirror didn't look like the girl who once cried in her car after being told she wasn't cutthroat enough. She looked composed, ready. Let's send the press kit at 7:12, I told Emily. 1 minute after the story's live. She grinned. Just enough time for them to panic. Then everything blurred. We were back in the dining room. Gregory was mid-sentence something about legacy, about how real entrepreneurs don't isolate themselves. I nodded absently, eyes drifting toward Susan. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't just glance. She stared. The ripple had begun. I let them finish their eulogies, knowing they were about to attend a resurrection. The living room smelled like nutmeg and arrogance. Brandy glasses clinked in soft, controlled rhythms. No one raised their voice. Bennett's didn't do rage. They did quiet condemnations wrapped in linen and polished into performance. I sat on the edge of a velvet armchair, hands folded neatly, ankles crossed like a guest. Not a daughter, not a founder, just an audience member at my own funeral. You walked away from everything we gave you, Gregory said, adjusting the cuff of his shirt with the gravitas of a priest at confession. He wasn't looking for an answer, just echoes. I sipped my drink, imagining the headline already blooming on every screen in that room. But I gave nothing away. Just watched the performance unfold, note by note, each sentence scripted in the old family language, guilt masquerading as wisdom, shame disguised as legacy. Chloe leaned in from her seat on the sofa. Lauren, I could arrange a meeting with one of our senior partners. He's seen companies like yours before. Maybe he could guide you into something more sustainable. Sustainable, I repeated softly, as though tasting the word for the first time. Charles chuckled under his breath, eyes fixed on his phone like he was bored with the evening's entertainment. Still playing with computers, he asked, without looking up. Lauren, you're what, mid-30s now. AI is a bubble, just like crypto. All noise, no profit. I didn't blink. He wanted to provoke, but I wasn't here for his rhythm. I was here for mine. Gregory stood then. Brandy glass still half full, casting a long shadow over the carpet. When we say we're worried, he said we mean we're ashamed. Ashamed that our name is tied to your recklessness. That you squandered every opportunity, every advantage on ego. He looked straight at me, expecting surrender, or at least a plea for redemption. Instead, I offered silence. That was when Susan, ever the peacemaker, cleared her throat with theatrical grace. Before we end this evening, she said I'd like to say a short prayer. For clarity and humility. For all of us. She reached out and clasped Chloe's hand. Chloe, to her credit, didn't flinch. I leaned forward, resting my elbows gently on my knees. Maybe clarity, I said, is about to arrive. Right about now. At first, nothing happened. Just the clink of Gregory setting down his glass, the shuffle of Susan drawing breath. Then Susan's phone lit up. She glanced down instinctively and froze. Then Charles's phone vibrated in his palm. He turned it over slowly. His smirk fell molecule by molecule. Then Chloe's screen glowed from her lap, casting a pale blue reflection under her chin. And like a silent wave crashing on marble, their expressions shifted. Not in bursts, but gradually, as if shame had to bloom in real time. I didn't move. They weren't at my funeral anymore. They were at my resurrection. When the headline dropped, the room dropped with it. No one breathed. Phones buzzed like cicadas in a heat wave, sharp, insistent, impossible to ignore. One by one, every member of the room became a statue, eyes glued to glowing screens. The Bennett estate's perfect stillness shattered, not with a scream, but with a headline. Chloe's phone lit up first, then Charles's. Gregory's buzzed angrily on the coffee table before he reached for it, as if sensing something bigger than himself had arrived. I remained seated, legs crossed, expression unreadable. I didn't look at them. I listened to the shifting air, the gasp Susan tried to stifle, the whisper of a finger tapping the glass, the sharp inhale as Charles's eyebrows shot upward. There it was, in stark, clean font. Quantum security breakthrough, valued at 6B. Meet Lauren Bennett. The name they used to sigh over in disappointment was now splashed across the Wall Street Journal homepage. Top story, top photo. Beneath the headline was a full-color image, me back straight, expression focused. Standing in the Cambridge facility's glass-walled conference room. There was no makeup artist, no corporate PR team, just presence. Real and earned. The article didn't waste time on fluff. It opened within a world obsessed with loud ambition. Lauren Bennett chose precision and silence. Now her firm has quietly surpassed every legacy competitor in the post-quantum security race. Gregory's lips parted like he might speak. But words failed him. For a man who controlled every boardroom he entered, he looked like he'd forgotten what language was. Susan's face was pale. She wasn't crying, but she was folding into herself. Shoulders curved inward, mouth trembling as if praying silently for an alternate headline to appear. Charles cursed under his breath. Jesus Christ! Chloe blinked rapidly. This can't be real. I turned to her finally. You never asked. You just judged. Silence. The article continued quoting major analysts and government sources. It explained how my company, Intralex, had been building encryption layers that could withstand not just current threats, but post-quantum code breaking. It listed the advisory board, MIT, former NSA, even one Nobel laureate. And then it hit them like a second wave. Intralex will be acquired by Quantum Bridge in a private deal valued at $6 billion. CEO Lauren Bennett declined detailed comment, but offered a quote, "Success doesn't need permission. It just needs silence and stamina." I could feel it, the unraveling. Charles shifted in his seat, rereading the figures. Gregory gripped the arms of his chair like he'd lost balance. Susan blinked twice and sat perfectly still, staring at her screen like it betrayed her. Even the room's soft lighting felt different now, less elegant, more exposed. You built all this. Without us, Chloe's voice was smaller than usual. Her superiority had drained out like air from a balloon. No, I replied. I built it because of you. And that was the truth. Because of the years spent being told I was impractical. Because of the Christmases where my ideas were met with silence. The birthdays where my ambitions were politely ignored. Because of every backhanded compliment and every empty promise of support that never came. Gregory finally spoke. Why would you blindside us like this? I tilted my head. You've had my number for years. You never used it. You just waited for me to fail. I thought I'd give you something to read instead. A beat passed, then another. I stood slowly. The weight of the moment wasn't heavy, it was satisfying. I didn't have to yell. I didn't even have to stay. My voice was clear, calm. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a call with Bloomberg. And with that, I turned, walked across the room of stunned faces and polished hardwood, past portraits of men who'd built legacies I was now eclipsing. I opened the front door. Behind me, the only thing left was the echo of my own name finally spoken with reverence. You can fake loyalty, but data, it never lies. The Quantum Bridge executive floor always felt too quiet. No chatter. Just the low hum of machines behind frosted glass and the near-inaudible tap of fingers across polished keyboards. I liked it that way. Silence here meant productivity, not manipulation. Emily entered with a tablet held tight against her chest like it might bite. "I think you should see this," she said. I waved her in. She locked the door behind her out of habit. We had good security protocols, military-grade end-to-end, but Emily always believed in human error, not just code vulnerabilities. And she wasn't wrong. She handed over the tablet. Internal access logs. Guest credentialed under alias J. Simons. Guess where they pinged from? I swiped through the logs. Conference room, legal database node. Download requests. The alias had Chloe's email pattern embedded in the packet signature. Sloppy. Or arrogant. They tried to scrub it, Emily added. But forensic traces don't lie. Timestamp aligns with the day before her firm filed that concerned counsel letter. I didn't need to ask what letter. I'd read it already 4 times. Michael Quantum Bridges' external counsel had forwarded it to me that morning. Subject, unethical concentration of interests. Formal objection. The letter, dressed in legalese, called into question my role in both Intralex and the upcoming merger, implying a potential violation of antitrust optics. It read neutral, but it dripped with motive. Chloe's firm had no business interfering unless she'd orchestrated it. Michael entered just then, Ty's slightly crooked coffee half full. "I've already flagged the objection as posturing," he said, "but if the press gets wind, it could slow the signing. And if we counter publicly," I asked. He paused. "That depends. Are you trying to bury her or outmaneuver her?" I turned to Derek, who had just stepped in. His voice was steel. "We could sue. This crosses into tortious interference." I shook my head. "Not yet." Derek raised an eyebrow. "She's not our problem," I said. "She's our lesson." I opened my secure drive and inserted a USB stick. I named the folder Sunset. A private habit, I name my critical evidence folders after endings. Not disasters, just closures. Inside, I dropped the access log report, the legal letter, and a backup of Chloe's alias credentials. No edits, no annotations. I wanted raw data. That's what the truth looked like. Emily looked relieved and sad all at once. "What are you going to do with it?" "Hold it," I said. "Wait. For what?" "For the moment when silence won't protect her anymore." Emily sat across from me, watching closely. "You always think 10 moves ahead, don't you?" "No. Just one. The one no one thinks I'll take." For a brief second, I let the wall drop. My voice was quieter. "This isn't about proving her wrong. It's about showing them what I survived." She nodded, saying nothing. Outside the office, the skyline of Cambridge blurred in the afternoon drizzle. Power in that moment wasn't loud. It was quiet confidence wrapped in encrypted layers. I wasn't here for vengeance. I was here to ensure that every narrative written about me by family rivals or press was rendered obsolete by proof. I turned back to my screen, ready to move on to the next set of documents. But just as I did, a ping echoed across my inbox. Subject: meeting confirmation, Department of Commerce. From Chloe Monroe to Regulatory Affairs, Quantum Bridge CC external parties. Time: Wednesday, 10 a.m. Note: Lauren Bennett's presence not required. I read it twice. Then I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "There it is." If Chloe wanted to play lawyer, she should have read the fine print. The smell of cinnamon toast and over-roasted espresso floated around us like a memory of calm. I sat across from Emily in a corner booth at the Copper Mug, one of those half-pretentious, half-cozy coffee shops near MIT, a place where baristas knew the names of at least 5 tech founders and always spelled mine wrong. Emily slid her phone across the table. "She finally did it," she said, trying to sound amused, but her knuckles were white from gripping the cup. I scrolled. The subject line in Chloe's firm letterhead glared back, "Cease and desist, intellectual property violation." Beneath that, a predictable barrage of legal jargon accusing me of infringing on my own code, claiming overlap in data architecture structures. I almost laughed. It was like being accused of forging your own signature. Are they serious? Emily asked. No, I said, sipping my lukewarm latte. They're desperate. I tapped out a short message to Derek. Received it. Not responding directly. Coordinating with Sutherland. He replied in less than a minute. Let me know when it's time to swing back. It wasn't time. Not yet. Back in the office, we moved to a shared workspace I sometimes used when I wanted to disappear into anonymity. No logos, no glass walls, just quiet desks and the low hum of old radiators. I opened my laptop, pulled up the cease and desist, and hit forward. Recipient Margaret Sutherland. IP Council attachment, bark code, logs, was get my versions, mas 2021 at 2023, PDF. The time-stamped Git logs showed incremental development over 3 years, every entry signed, synced, and backed up. The code in question, mine. Long before Chloe's firm even got wind of our architecture. I mean, this is idiotic, Emily said, tapping her screen. Chloe's people pulled an outdated concept diagram from that old pitch deck you abandoned and tried to file it with a predated timestamp. I didn't reply. I was already crafting the next email. No anger. No emotion. Just intent. Subject, return to sender. To Chloe Monroe. C. Monroe, WaldenLegal.com. C. Margaret Sutherland. Derek Ruiz. Michael Adams. Quantum Bridge. Body, your firm's concerns are noted. For your records, I've attached verifiable time logs and patent submission receipts. Kindly verify with the USPTO filing, Berkel 49 and in 9278 QB. I trust this resolves the matter. Lauren Bennett, I pressed send. Then I muted the legal webinar streaming in the background and looked out the window. The sky over Cambridge was pale and calm, but there was a rumble beneath it, like a quiet shifting of tectonic plates. She didn't know it yet, but Chloe had already begun to lose. Emily leaned back in her chair. You're not going to sue, are you? No, I said. She wants that. Headlines. Conflict. So what are you going to do? I smiled. Outgrow her. Publicly. The best punishment was being seen. Fully finally, without needing to justify my presence. I pulled up my calendar and selected New Event. Title exclusive with Bloomberg Time. Wednesday 11th, 15 a.m. location. Virtual description 1. Small truth. Loud enough. I didn't need to beat Chloe. I just needed to get there before she did. The San Francisco air had that sharpness. Only November could bring crisp enough to clear a mind and cold enough to remind you what mattered. I arrived at Quantum Bridge headquarters just after sunrise, before the city had fully stretched awake before she could get ahead of me. The building's glass facade reflected a pink-orange sky, as if it too anticipated something about to break. I walked in without ceremony. No PR team, no photographer, no assistant trailing behind. Just me, my signed documents, and a future no longer up for negotiation. The boardroom was as clinical and expensive as expected chrome finishes. Smart panels, the gentle hum of filtered air. Ms. Jameson, Quantum Bridge's CEO, was already seated, tapping notes into a tablet with surgical calm. Derek stood beside her, reviewing the integration milestones we'd outlined weeks ago. There was coffee untouched. And silence, the kind that came not from uncertainty, but precision. All documents have been signed, Ms. Jameson said without looking up. The system will reflect the new ownership by midnight. I nodded, slipping into the chair across from her. No words were necessary. The terms spoke for themselves. 64% ownership of their intellectual property portfolio. Not shares, not influence. Control. Every encryption layer, every prototype, mine. Chloe had spent months circling Quantum Bridge like a hawk convinced she was the only one flying, but I'd built a quieter path, one paved with consent clarity and contracts. She'd been negotiating with the past. I was already living in the future. Derek slid the final file across the table. On the front, final transaction summary. On the inside, my name appeared 4 times. Once as primary acquisition party, once as majority IP custodian. And finally, under a single line, Ms. Jameson had insisted be included for transparency. All technological assets will now operate under the oversight of Bennett Solutions, LLC. And then right on cue, the monitor at the far end of the room came alive. Chloe's face appeared. She wore a navy blazer, hair pinned up, smile controlled. She had no idea who was watching from just outside the camera's angle. "Ms. Jameson," she began, "thank you for taking the meeting. I know your internal deadline has passed, but Walden Legal has revised its proposal. We're now prepared to offer a 12% premium over your last valuation, plus a 3-year development grant." Ms. Jameson didn't even blink. "I appreciate the enthusiasm, Chloe, but our agreement has already been finalized." Chloe faltered barely, but I caught it. That second of silence before pride rushes in to patch over confusion. "With whom, if I may ask?" she said, voice thinning. Ms. Jameson leaned back slightly, folding her hands with deliberate calm. "With someone who showed up early. Not just today, but months ago. Someone who made decisions not with ego, but with vision." Chloe's brows tightened. "I think we may be misaligned on the timeline," my team was told. "There's no misalignment," Jameson replied, her tone like polished steel. "There's just movement, and we've already chosen our future." She turned, slightly glancing toward me, not dramatically, just enough. "And she's sitting right here." Chloe froze. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. I rose from my chair, stepped into frame, and locked eyes with the screen. "Hi, Chloe." Her expression collapsed inward. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply stood the way truth does when it doesn't need an introduction. Across 1,000 miles of fiber optics and delay, the war she thought she'd won began to disintegrate, and I hadn't raised my voice once. Just when I thought she'd retreated, she sent a letter that nearly undid me. It arrived at 2:03 a.m., a ping that pierced through the quiet like glass shattering on tile. I was awake, of course. Sleep hadn't come easily in weeks. Not since the press storm, not since the sudden shift in who I was allowed to be in the public eye. One headline had changed everything. But shadows always linger behind a spotlight, and Chloe, predictably, was one of them. I assumed it would be another interview request, maybe a follow-up from Bloomberg, or a late-night Slack from Emily. But the subject line was as sharp as it was sterile: RE Federal Contract Inquiry Urgent Review. The sender, not Chloe. She was smarter than that. It was from the Department of Defense's Office of Compliance. Attached was a PDF. I opened it, and there it was. Chloe's signature, her name stamped at the bottom of a formal complaint. It was cold, calculated, and cloaked in the language of patriotism. She'd accused me of manipulating federal innovation grants for personal gain and withholding material disclosures that affect national security evaluations. It wasn't just a jab, it was a loaded gun placed gently on my doorstep, safety off. I sat up, my back against the wall blanket pooling around my waist. The words blurred and snapped back into focus. I reread the paragraph where she implied I had ties to private military applications, something so far from truth it almost stunned me into laughter. Almost. I hit call. Emily answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but alert. "Lauren, I need you to see something." "It's already in the compliance inbox." I heard the clicks of her keyboard. Then silence. Jesus, did she really send this? "It's Chloe." She inhaled sharply. "What do we do?" I'm thinking. I could hear Derek in the background asking what was going on. Emily must have mouthed something, because the next thing I heard was the quiet rustle of someone walking away. "She's targeting the DOD," she said. "That's not just sabotage. It's calculated character assassination." I know. My mind raced, looping back to something Gregory once said: "Chloe knows how to hit where it hurts. You hit walls." At the time, it stung. But tonight, I saw it for what it was, a warning I'd ignored. I opened my desk drawer, fingers brushing past hard drives and blueprints until they landed on a folded piece of paper I hadn't looked at in months. My grandfather's letter. To my wild one with steel, it began. I whispered the words aloud as if he were still here. "You're going to shake things that don't want to be moved. That's your gift? and your curse. But remember, a tree with deep roots doesn't fear wind. I held the paper to my chest and let the words settle. No lawyers, no counter letters. Not yet. I needed something they couldn't redact or reinterpret. I opened my phone's camera. No makeup, no lighting. Just me. Hoodie-wrapped eyes, red voice quiet but unwavering. This company I began was built for the ones who never got an invitation. For those who were told they were too weird, too loud, too much, or too little. We didn't fit in the rooms we were supposed to enter, so we built new ones. I paused, looking down at the screen, then back up. You want clarity? Here it is. I've made mistakes, but never about who I built this for. No script, no filter. Just a truth sharp enough to bleed without yelling. I uploaded the video with the caption, "Let's talk about transparency." Then I turned off the lights and crawled back into bed, unsure if I'd wake up to silence or fire. By sunrise, the notifications were relentless. Journalists requesting statements, allies messaging support, even strangers quoting pieces of the video like scripture. But underneath the noise was something quieter. A shift. People saw the truth not because I shouted it, but because it bled. Emily called back, voice charged with cautious excitement. The DOD saw the video. They haven't replied to Chloe. They reached out to us instead for a meeting. Derek texted, "Your play, your voice. That's what wins." And Gregory, he didn't call, but I imagined him watching the video, seeing his daughter not begging for acceptance, but standing in the storm with her name untouched. Maybe for the first time, even he couldn't deny it. In the quiet before that meeting, I sat with coffee gone cold and eyes still raw from the night. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt true, and that for once was enough. The video hits 4 million views in 12 hours. They thought they could stage a takedown. I built the whole damn stage. The lights were blinding, not harsh but intentional. Spotlights sliced through the vastness of the Moscone Center's main auditorium, bouncing off the sharp edges of tech banners and glass displays. I stood center stage beneath a 40-foot screen titled Quantum for Humanity, and for once, every chair in the 1,000-seat hall faced me. 10 months ago, I sat at the edge of my father's table, silent, judged, positioned as an outlier. Today, there was no table, no family in attendance, just a woman holding a microphone and a truth they couldn't drown. My heels clicked once across the stage floor, the sound swallowed by the hush of anticipation. Cameras glowed red, phones hovered midair. But I didn't flinch. I didn't tremble. I breathed. "My name is Lauren Bennett," I began, "and I've spent the last 5 years building technology that doesn't need to ask for permission to matter." A pause. The kind that lands like punctuation when you own the sentence. But before I talk about data, let's talk about silence. The kind that follows you into rooms where people remember your failures but not your fire. I spoke not in equations, but in memories of doubt, of exclusion, of being the girl too loud for her own good and too quiet to be heard. I never named names. I didn't need to. There was once a girl, I said, who was told she was too much. So she decided to become more. She turned too much into momentum. Somewhere in the front row, a woman mid-30s, curls, framing her jaw, clapped before anyone else. Then the entire room joined. An ovation, not for victory, but for recognition. I closed with the line I'd rewritten 27 times. Innovation isn't born from approval. It rises from rejection. The applause didn't stop. It rolled like a wave. And somewhere in the noise, I felt it not triumph, but arrival. Backstage, as the crowd poured into the exhibition floor and press began posting live takes, I exhaled. Emily handed me my phone without a word. A notification blinked. A message. "Chloe, I was wrong. Can we talk?" For a moment, I stared at the message like it belonged to someone else. Chloe never apologized. Not when we were kids. Not when she took credit. Not even when she turned my struggle into a dinner topic. The words "I was wrong" looked foreign on my screen, like a code I didn't expect to decode. I didn't respond. Not yet. Outside, the conference floor buzzed with talk of quantum bridge and female leadership in deep tech. A teenage girl wearing a NASA hoodie stopped me for a photo. "You said everything I didn't know how to," she said, hands trembling slightly. I smiled, nodded, said nothing extra. Let the silence carry weight. Later, during a roundtable with CTOs from across the globe, one executive leaned over and whispered, "They underestimated you. Classic mistake." I didn't correct him. I let them all make peace with their mistake in real time. By evening, WSJ had already published their follow-up, "The Woman Who Refused to Vanish." My face above the fold again, but this time without a shadow of shame. The article included phrases like visionary, resilient, and quietly disruptive. But the word I saw most was unapologetic. Back at the hotel, I sat with my laptop open, staring at Chloe's message again. A single sentence, but packed with implications. Oh, was it sincere, strategic, warning, a trap I didn't know? But I knew I wasn't the same Lauren who needed her approval. Or her explanations. I typed one word. Not yes. Not no. Why? Then I hit send. At 1 a.m., I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in my suite overlooking the San Francisco skyline. The city lights blinked like thoughts I hadn't processed, yet brilliant, scattered, endless. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, trying to center myself. I remembered the girl who used to sit alone in the campus lab on Friday nights, writing algorithms with headphones on to block out the world. That girl had survived. I wasn't chasing vindication anymore. I was rewriting the definition of belonging, on my own terms. My phone vibrated again. Chloe, because I didn't know how to lose to you. That was honest. Maybe the first honest thing she'd ever sent me. But honesty wasn't closure. Not yet. I locked my phone not with anger, but with clarity. They thought I'd come to play a part. Instead, I wrote the script, built the set, directed the light, and when the curtain rose, I didn't just take the stage. I was the stage. I used to be seated at their table with my mouth shut. Now I own the table, and the minutes were mine. The panel was called Transparency in Leadership, but the air inside the MIT Business Ethics Symposium felt anything but transparent. Mahogany walls framed the stage water glasses, were lined with military precision, and cameras from 3 different networks zoomed in on our nameplates like they were peering into confessionals. My nameplate read, Lauren Bennett, CEO, Prisma Tech. Across from me sat industry veterans, bankers, executives, a former senator. Between us, a sleek projection screen cycled through logos and ethics quotes. The moderator's voice was gentle but pointed. I kept my posture, relaxed legs, crossed at the ankle hands, calm in my lap. Not a drop of sweat beneath my collar. When it was my turn to speak, I leaned forward. There are 2 ways to erase someone, I said. You can deny their name, or deny their value. I was denied both. Not by strangers, by people who preferred control to progress. The silence after that sentence wasn't just respectful, it was sharp. I didn't name them. I didn't have to. Somewhere in the crowd, I could feel Chloe's presence, a static hum at the edge of my awareness. She was there back row, watching. I hadn't seen her since her late-night text. She hadn't replied to my why Gregory I hadn't expected at all. But there he was, crisp in a dark gray suit, seated 2 rows behind the front journalists. Stone-faced, unblinking. A question came from a professor of finance. How do you view legacy, Ms. Bennett, especially coming from a family long known in business? I smiled, calm, practiced. Legacy isn't inherited, I replied. It's earned. And it's most powerful when it rises from silence, not entitlement. The audience murmured. One panelist shifted uncomfortably. I continued. When I founded Prisma Tech, I didn't just build a product. I built a promise. And when you've been shut out of rooms your entire life, the rooms you build mean more than the rooms you enter. Then I advanced my presentation slide. The screen filled with charts, our full diversity report, our open financials, our code of ethics. No other company on the panel had brought data. This, I said, is what transparency looks like. Not because we're perfect, but because we don't hide behind power. We use it. I glanced briefly toward Gregory. His jaw was clenched. Chloe was still and small in the back row, as if wishing the chairs could swallow her whole. That's when it happened. A journalist near the aisle raised her hand. Ms. Bennett, a quick follow-up if I may. I nodded. Is it true your family tried to sabotage your Quantum Bridge acquisition? The question echoed across the hall like a dropped stone in still water. For a moment, the auditorium held its breath. Even the panelists beside me turned waiting. I didn't blink. I believe some people confuse protection with prevention. And sometimes when people fear what you're building, they try to stop it before it forces them to reflect. The journalist opened her mouth for a follow-up, but I raised a hand gently, not to silence her, but to guide the room back to focus. This panel isn't about vendettas, I said. It's about leadership. And leadership means knowing when to move forward without dragging the debris. There was a pause. Then applause. Not explosive, but grounded like a room making up its mind. The moderator shifted topics, but I saw what I needed to. Chloe stood and left the back row, head low. Gregory remained, but his attention had turned not on me, but inward, staring at something only he could see. After the session, journalists clustered near the doors. One asked for an exclusive, another for a quote. I gave neither. I moved through the crowd with the composure of someone who no longer sought validation, only momentum. Outside, Emily was waiting. You saw them, she asked, stepping into my pace. Every breath I replied. And the question at the end, I shrugged. Let people ask. It only matters if I stop answering on my terms. Later that night, a clip from my speech began trending. Legacy isn't inherited, it's earned. The phrase became a headline, a hashtag, a magnet for every underdog with a dream and a family who doubted them. Gregory didn't approach me. Chloe didn't message. But their silence told a new story. They weren't leading anymore. They were watching. You don't need to shout when the whole room already leans in to hear you. That thought played in my mind as the makeup artist dabbed powder across my cheeks, the lights overhead, humming in anticipation. Across the studio floor, the iconic white lettering of the Women in Power set glowed behind polished glass. 2 chairs, 1 host, and 1 sister trying to outrun her own shadow. Chloe sat across from me, posture too perfect, smile too measured. Her blazer was a calculated shade of navy, sincere, trustworthy. Her voice when she spoke was honeyed with regret. We've always wanted the best for Lauren, she told Caitlin Reeves, the host. She's brilliant, determined. But when someone you love takes a risky path, it's only natural to worry. I didn't flinch. Let her set the stage with good intentions. Truth didn't need a spotlight. It carried its own gravity. Caitlin turned to me. Lauren, when your family called that emergency meeting last year, how did you feel walking in? I held her gaze, then looked into the camera. Sometimes, I said, love wears a mask called control. And sometimes, the people who claim to protect you are simply afraid of what you'll become without them. Silence blanketed the room, not uncomfortable, reverent. Then a slow wave of applause from the in-studio audience. Caitlin nodded, her eyes sharp but warm. Chloe's fingers tightened subtly on her lap. We continued. Questions about women in leadership, about startups and visibility. I answered each calmly with stories, not statistics. The time a professor told me I lacked polish. The investor who asked if my co-founder was the real tech mind. The way I built in spite of it all. Then Caitlin smiled like a chess player who just cornered her queen. We've reviewed some legal filings connected to Quantum Bridge, she said, turning a page. There's a letter dated November 12th, sent from your law firm, Ms. Monroe, requesting the board consider excluding Lauren from future negotiations due to internal conflicts of interest. Chloe froze. I don't recall authorizing that letter, she said slowly. Caitlin raised an eyebrow. But it bears your signature. Chloe's smile cracked. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. My gaze stayed on Caitlin, then the audience, then the camera. If you've ever been doubted by those who should have lifted, you know that you're not the one who failed. I said, my voice steady. The silence that followed wasn't stunned. It was understanding. And it traveled through every screen tuned in across the country. After the segment ended, the studio didn't empty. People lingered. Cameramen paused to nod. A young intern mouthed, "Thank you." Chloe stood smoothing her blazer, avoiding my eyes like they might burn. Caitlin shook my hand with both of hers. That she said wasn't just an interview, that was a shift. Outside, Emily was already waiting with her phone in one hand, eyes scanning headlines. Front page of tech news, she said, and trending in 6 countries. I barely reacted. I was calm in the way. Rivers are calm because they know exactly where they're going. We walked down the hall together as a reporter caught up. "Ms. Bennett, any comment on your sister's letter?" I stopped. "Only this," I replied. "Sometimes people borrow power. I build it." That evening, back in my apartment, I sat with a cup of tea, letting the weight of everything settle. I rewatched the segment once, not for vanity, but for truth. There was no shaking in my voice, no apology in my posture. Chloe hadn't messaged again, and I didn't need her to. The people who once tried to narrate my story were now footnotes in a chapter they never authored. The next morning, an op-ed ran in the Boston Globe. The revolution was televised, and she didn't raise her voice. Comments flooded in, women recounting moments they'd been diminished, men admitting they'd once dismissed someone like me. One said, "My daughter watched. She wants to start coding." I forwarded it to Emily. Her reply, proof. Later that day, Chloe's firm issued a quiet statement. No further comment, no denial, no apology. I didn't need either. I walked into the next board meeting knowing something had changed, not just in the room, but in the world around it. When a woman tells the truth calmly, the whole system shakes. Not from noise, from knowing it can't unhear her. The thing about houses built on names, they fall fastest when the truth knocks. The email landed like a quiet bell tolling over everything they'd built. Emily was already at my desk when I walked in, laptop, open, expression, unreadable. "Midtown Dynamics just pulled their account from Chloe's firm," she said. "That's 10 million in billables gone." I didn't respond right away. I sat down, wrapped my hands around a mug of tea, and watched the world shift without having to lift a finger. I hadn't sent the letter. I hadn't released the documents. I'd only spoken in my own voice, and apparently that had been enough. On the second screen, Emily clicked through a stream of headlines. Bennett family in ethics crisis. From powerhouse to PR nightmare. Lauren Bennett's quiet uprising. Gregory's board is meeting today, she added. Internal review. Some want him out. A silence lingered between us, weighty but calm. In Gregory's private study across the city, the mood was anything but calm. His voice, once so measured, now boomed through walnut walls, tearing into Chloe over speakerphone. "You had one job, keep the firm clean. And now? Look," Chloe tried to defend herself. "Dad, I didn't know the document trail would go public. I tried to bury it. Clearly not deep enough," Gregory snapped. "You think this family name survives another scandal?" But the House of Bennett wasn't cracking because of exposure. It had always been hollow. It just took the light to show it. That evening, I received an anonymous email. The sender, unclear. The content, a family memo circulated internally. It read, "In light of recent disruptions caused by Lauren Bennett's choices and public behavior, we recommend distancing brand affiliations until further notice." I read it twice, then 3 times. I showed Emily. She didn't even flinch. "They still don't get it," she said. "You didn't destroy them. They did." I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Later that night, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Chloe stood there. No makeup, eyes swollen, shoulders small. She looked nothing like the woman who once sat beside me with carefully chosen words and legal armor. She looked like a sister who didn't know where else to turn. "Please," she said. Her voice cracked. "Just help me fix it." I leaned against the doorframe. "You'd need to understand what you broke first." The funny thing is, I didn't feel triumphant watching them fall. I felt something closer to grief. Not because I mourned the empire, but because I'd once believed it meant something to bear the Bennett name. To try and salvage its meaning even when it didn't make room for me. There were nights I stayed up wondering if I should have explained myself more. Maybe if I had just said the right thing in that dining room, they'd have seen me differently. But the truth was, never what they lacked. They had plenty of chances. What they lacked was the will to see anything outside their reflection. Now, The reflection cracked. Emily handed me her tablet again. You should see this. It was a comment thread under my keynote video. One of Chloe's former associates had written anonymously, she warned them. They didn't listen. I was in the room. Another added, if this is how they treat family, I'm glad I never signed. It spread like a slow burn, clean, deliberate, irreversible. Somewhere in their tower of glass and leather chairs, Chloe must have realized no amount of PR could claw it back. When she stepped inside my apartment, the warmth hit her like a wall. No pretenses. Just the scent of peppermint tea and the quiet hum of a record playing low. Nina Simone singing like truth didn't need volume. She stood awkwardly, taking in the simplicity of it all. I used to think you were just stubborn, she said softly. Now I think maybe you were brave. I didn't reply. I walked to the kitchen, poured her a cup, and set it on the counter. You think bravery fixes this? I asked. Chloe looked down. No. But maybe humility starts it. The silence between us wasn't hostile. It was ancient, like the kind that grows between siblings too long pretending everything's fine. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote my resignation. The board hasn't seen it yet. That startled me. She was still clinging to structure, to gestures even now, but perhaps that's all she had left to offer. I nodded toward the door. You can leave it here, or take it home. But what you do next has to be yours, not his, not mine. Closure isn't peace. It's the decision to stop needing apologies. The wind was gentle on the rooftop, brushing against the backs of metal chairs and coaxing strands of hair out of place. I had never hosted a celebration before, not one that was mine. There were no floral centerpieces, no long speeches, no formal attire, just a table of food someone brought from a deli. Downtown, a cooler of sparkling water and the quiet hum of people who mattered. Emily clinked her bottle against mine and smiled. You made it, she said. I'm still making it, I replied, watching the sky lean into spring. Derek handed out mismatched paper plates and made a joke about us becoming accidental minimalists. Some of the earliest team members were here too. Shivani, who coded our prototype in a single weekend. Raj, who had once mortgaged his apartment just to fund our first server batch. They stood close, spoke little, and understood everything. I moved between them, slowly, thanking each one not for their skill, but for staying when everything told them not to. There were no toasts, just nods, just presence. Later, I sat alone near the edge feet, propped on the low railing. Emily joined me with an envelope in hand. You got a letter, she said. Addressed to Quantum Bridge HQ from a high school in Kansas. I opened it expecting something polite. Instead, I found a line that stopped me cold. I saw you stand alone and it gave me courage. Her name was Lydia, 17. Wants to study cybersecurity. She wrote about watching the interview with Chloe, then the keynote, then the panel. She said she replayed my voice when her counselor said MIT might be too much for her. I folded the letter slowly and placed it in my coat pocket. I needed that, I whispered. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, then slid something into my hand. The USB folder. Sunset. I hadn't thought about it in days. All the evidence, the proof, the pain. You sure, she asked? I nodded. It served its purpose. I walked back into the office, plugged it in one last time, and hovered over the file. Delete. No dramatic music. No ceremony, just a decision. I didn't need it anymore. On my way out, I passed the framed letter I'd hung that morning. My grandfather's handwriting curved across thick cream paper. To the wild one with steel, never let them dull your edge. It was the only letter I'd ever framed. No family photos, no childhood certificates, just that, and a shelf of models built by my team. My phone buzzed, a voicemail. From Susan. I hesitated, then pressed play. She sounded tired, hollow. I saw the interview. You looked strong. I'm sorry if I made things harder. I didn't mean to. I just wish things had been different. She didn't say, I'm proud of you. She didn't say, I believe you. She ended with, call me if you ever want to come home. I deleted it, because I was already home. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, Painting the bricks in gold, Derek handed me a sealed envelope. From the National Tech Ethics Council, he said. They want you to chair a reform committee. National appointment. I opened it. Read once, then twice. Beneath the formal headers, it simply said, your voice. Your standards? Let's rebuild better. I looked back at the rooftop. The team laughing softly. Emily refilling cups. The table emptying not because of excess, but because of enough. I smiled. Not everything needed closure. Some things just needed to be left behind. Emily returned with a blanket and tossed it over our legs. Do you realize what this is? She asked. A request? No, she smiled. It's the world catching up. Her words settled in slowly. Somewhere deep, a version of me bruised from years of deflection and doubt finally exhaled. The rooftop lights flickered on. Wind carried laughter up from the street. Out on the rooftop, I raised my glass. Emily joined me. So did Derek Shivani and the others. No one asked for a speech, but I gave one anyway, just a sentence. To building what we needed when no one else would. The stars blinked overhead. Lydia's letter burned gently in my coat pocket. Not with fire, but with fuel. Some doors you close quietly. Others you seal with your name on the wall outside. Not every ending needs applause. Some just need presence. The Bennett Initiative for Independent Innovation stood tall on the corner of Tremont and Boylston, its facade all glass and brushed steel like a promise made visible. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee. Above the doors in bold brass lettering gleamed a name, Henry Bennett Memorial Hall. Beneath it, in a sleek, modern plaque, a second inscription founded by Lauren Bennett. My name, not shared, not borrowed, just mine. I adjusted the cuffs of my blazer, not to smooth them, just to feel that I was here. Present. Whole. Emily stood beside me, tablet in hand, checking the final list of attendees. A few tech columnists, local press, mentors, dozens of young women in engineering programs from across the state. Chloe's name was on the list. Her RSVP line read, unable to attend. I smiled anyway. The opening ceremony was brief just the way I'd asked. No fanfare, no long-winded eulogies, just a single podium, the city seal behind me, and the first cohort of scholars standing in front rows. I cleared my throat and looked down at my notes but didn't use them. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about replacing shame with legacy, about showing what can grow when no one's looking and planting it where everyone can see. Some of them stood with their arms crossed, skeptical. Others clutched notebooks, eager. I let my eyes rest on them. They were the future. No family name could gatekeep this space now. A few camera flashes, a ripple of applause. The press asked about my family. I didn't flinch. I smiled. I said nothing. Later, while walking through the lab wing, a girl no older than 20 asked, do you ever wish you'd stayed? With them, I paused by a display table of robotics kits. I didn't leave them, I said softly. They let go of me. I thought about how often I'd swallowed the urge to answer that question. Now, with the city skyline behind me, an opportunity in front of them, the truth came easy. She nodded, eyes wide. That's a powerful way to see it. I showed her how to recalibrate a sensor. She beamed. In the hallway, an older man approached. My former professor, Dr. Voss. He didn't speak much, but he placed his hand on my shoulder with a pride words couldn't capture. Behind us, someone was already naming a group chat future founders. I passed Emily a folded paper, the fund's first anonymous grant. She opened it, then laughed. You're the anonymous donor. Someone has to be, I said. We made our way up to the top floor. The door at the end of the hall had no guards, no ceremony. Just a silver plaque that read, Lauren Bennett Founder. I turned the handle, entered the room alone. A corner office, clean-lined soft wood sunlight pouring over a long desk. No family photos, no apology letters framed. Just a single bookshelf with my grandfather's letter at eye level. Never let them dull your edge. I'd kept it tucked in the back of a drawer for years, unsure what it meant. Now I knew. The sharp edge I'd been warned against had carved the very space we stood in. I sat. exhaled. Outside the window, the city pulsed on. Cars, trains motion. But in here, there was stillness. I thought about what it took to get here. The silence I swallowed. The names I stopped needing. The lines I refused to cross. A legacy wasn't something inherited. It was something chosen. I stood once more, walked to the door and turned off the light. Then I closed the door behind me. Alone. Fulfilled. Unapologetic. They watched me fall, then doubted when I stood back up. But you're here now, reading this, breathing in the quiet power of reclaiming your own name. If any part of my story touched you, I want to hear it. Leave a comment not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been told to stay small. Let's fill this space with voices that refuse to be silenced. And if you're standing at your own door unsure whether to knock or walk away, remember closure isn't granted, it's chosen. Build the room where your truth fits, then close the door with your name on it.